So we started a new series on Sunday called Inspired. It's all about how to read the Bible well. As Christians, we have this conviction that the Bible is important, that it's divinely inspired, but what does that mean? How do we make sense of it? Well, for us, the lens through which we interpret the Bible, our hermeneutic, is Jesus. We believe that Jesus is the only exact representation of the divine in human history, and that's the lens through which we have to make sense of everything that we're reading in the Bible. This is really important because the Bible is this collection, this library of texts written by people in different contexts and cultures over different centuries and eras, and all of that, we believe, leads toward Jesus. But this is the important thing, is understanding that there is the historical Jesus, the person who walked through the world as the divine incarnation of God that shows us what God is like, but that the Christ has always been part of the divine. This is what John is talking about in the prologue when he talks about the Logos, that the Word of God, the expression of God in the world, is Jesus. That at the very beginning, before there was anything, before there was even creation, God was still always this eternal dance of gift and reception and relationship. This is why we can say that God is love, because before there was anything else, when there was only God, God was still loving, God was still relationship. And so this Christ that was there at the very beginning, that's what John is talking about. It's what Paul is talking about in Colossians when he says, everything that has been made through him, is now incarnated, living in human form in Jesus. And that Christ is now set free in the world in the resurrection. So that same Christ there at the beginning of the founding of the universe, that same Christ that was incarnated in Jesus, is the same Christ that is now with us whenever 2 or 3 of us gather together to worship, to pray, to share our story with each other. And that becomes the lens through which we now read all of history. This is really important because Jesus is a human figure. That's important Christian theology, that Jesus is fully human and fully divine at the same time. It's one of the great mysteries of the Christian faith. But that the Christ has always been there, stepping, shaping, leading human history to the moment when Christ would be incarnated in Jesus. And that allows us then to look back on history and reinterpret everything that has come before Jesus to see how it's pointing toward Jesus. It's what allows us to look forward into the future, our eschatology or an imagination for a prefigured future, to see how that makes sense in the light of Jesus as well. That the imagination of God would be on earth as it is in heaven, and all of that seen through the lens of Jesus. And this becomes really important because the Bible is full of, again, all of these different writers writing at different points in history from different perspectives and cultures, but all of that is pointing, it's leading in a narrative that comes to Jesus. But if we don't have that as a grounding lens, if we don't have that as a grounding hermeneutic, we're going to get tossed to and fro by all of these different writers, writing from all of their different perspectives, writing through all of their times and points in history, and it's going to be hard to build a cohesive framework or narrative throughout the Bible. And so Jesus becomes that for us. We don't worship the Bible. The Bible is not at the center of our faith. It's what leads us to Jesus. It's incredibly important because that's how it keeps us all on the same page. But the center of everything that we believe, the center of how we make sense of everything, including the Bible, is Jesus. The Christ that was there at the founding of the universe, now alive and showing us what divine looks like in human form, helping us to imagine what our future looks like if we can follow in those footsteps. This becomes really important for us as Christians. It becomes really important for us at Commons. It was the only grounding narrative that we had until canonization about 350 years into the Christian story. Jesus at the center of everything that we do. Jesus at the center of how we make sense of everything in our world, including our Bibles. And I hope that actually begins to bring new life, new spirit, new breath into the Bible as you read it, seeing the ways, even when it's hard sometimes, that it points toward Jesus. So that's what we're talking about in this series. And now from here, we're going to begin to look at different points in the Bible, and we're going to do the work to interpret them through the lens of Jesus.